The night the rain came sideways, Charlotte Whitfield was counting $14 under a highway overpass outside Briar Hollow, North Carolina. She counted it twice, then a third time. Same answer. $14 and a black dog named Raven curled against her knees for warmth. She was 20 years old. She had been sleeping outside for 16 months, and tucked deep inside her wet backpack was the only thing she had refused to sell, a small walnut box her grandfather had carved for her 16th birthday. Wendell Whitfield had been dead for 3 years. His sons had taken the house, the truck, the savings, every photograph off every wall, everything except one thing. A steel-doored garage behind the old property, 6-digit combination lock. Her uncle had tried to break it open the week after the funeral. He hired a locksmith. He kicked the door until his boot split. Then he walked away muttering that there was nothing worth saving inside an old man's shed. He was wrong. What Charlotte didn't know, what nobody in her family knew, was that her grandfather had been hiding something behind that steel door for over 30 years. Something he had spent a lifetime building. Something he had locked away and waited patiently for the right person to find. And on that cold November night, soaked to the bone with $14 in her pocket, Charlotte was about to discover that the key had been in her hands the whole time. She just hadn't known where to look. The rain didn't fall that night. It came sideways. Charlotte Whitfield pressed herself deeper into the concrete corner where the highway overpass met the embankment, and she pulled the soaked hood of her jacket tight around her ears. The jacket was 3 sizes too big. It belonged to a man named Ray she had never met. Ray had worked the same roofing crew as Charlotte for 5 days in September before the foreman ran out of cash and ran out of patience and told everyone to go home. Ray left the jacket on a folding chair. Charlotte took it. That was 2 months ago. The name was still stitched above the pocket in red thread. $14, she counted again. A 10, 3 ones. A folded dollar bill she had found behind a vending machine outside the bus station in Garner. $14. The same number it had been yesterday. The same number it would be tomorrow, unless she found work or stole something. She wasn't going to steal anything. Wendell had taught her better than that. Wendell. She pushed the thought down. Raven shifted against her knees. The dog was lean and black, and the left ear folded sideways from something that had happened to him before Charlotte found him behind a Citgo station back in August. He had walked up to her while she was eating half a hot dog out of a paper boat. He sat down. He looked at her, and he hadn't stopped looking at her since. She put her hand on his back. "You cold." The dog didn't answer. The dog never answered. But he pressed closer. She closed her eyes. She was 20 years old. Her body was already telling her things it shouldn't have had to say for another 40 years. Her knees popped when she stood. Her shoulder ached in the rain. A tooth on the lower right side had been bothering her since August, and she didn't want to think about what was happening to it because there was no money to do anything about it. $14. Charlotte reached into her backpack. She pulled out the box. Walnut. Small enough to fit in one hand. The dovetail joint so clean you had to run your finger along the seam to find where one piece met the other. Wendell had carved it for her 16th birthday. He had set it on the kitchen table that morning next to her plate of pancakes, and he had said only one thing. "Some boxes are for keeping things. This one is for you." She had asked him what was inside. He had smiled. "Whatever you decide to put there." She had been 16. She had thought that was a strange answer. She had put a hair tie in it and a photo of her at the county fair when she was 8, and a piece of folded notebook paper with the names of 3 boys she had a crush on. That was 4 years ago. 4 years and a lifetime ago. She wiped the box dry with the inside of her sleeve. The wood was darker than she remembered, because everything was darker now. A semi-truck blew past the overpass and the wind hit her face, and Raven flinched against her side, and the rain kept coming sideways, and Charlotte thought for one bad second about walking out into the road. She didn't. She put the box back in the bag. She put her arms around the dog. She slept. She was 6 years old when Wendell Whitfield walked through the front door of the Greyhound bus station in Raleigh and crouched down in front of her. Her father had brought her there. Her father had told her to wait. She had waited for 2 hours. She had counted the tiles on the floor of the bus station, which were beige with brown specks, and she had counted them up to 48 because 48 was the highest number she knew at the time. The woman behind the ticket counter had asked her 3 times if she was okay. Charlotte had nodded 3 times. On the 4th time, the woman had picked up the phone, and 20 minutes later, Wendell Whitfield walked through the glass doors with rain on his work jacket and his hat in his hand, and he had crouched down in front of her and he had said, "Hey there, little one. You ready to go home?" Charlotte had looked up at him. "Is Daddy coming back?" Wendell had thought about it for a long time before he answered. Other adults would have lied. Other adults would have said, "Yes, sweetheart, of course he is. Just give him time." Wendell did not lie, not to children, not about important things. "I don't know, Charlotte, but maybe, he had taken her hand. Her father, Dorsey Whitfield, had not come back. Not that day, not that week, not that year. Charlotte had waited at the front window of Wendell's farmhouse for 3 days straight, and on the 4th morning, Wendell had sat her down at the kitchen table and poured her a glass of warm milk, because that was what his own mother used to do when something serious needed saying. "Your daddy loves you," he had said, "but there are some people in this world who never learned how to stay. That isn't your fault. So here's what we're going to do. You're going to live here. You're going to eat breakfast before school, and on Saturdays you and me are going to build things." Charlotte had drunk the milk slowly. What kind of things? Whatever needs building. That had been the deal. For the next 11 years, he had kept every part of it. The thing about Wendell Whitfield was that he was quiet. Tall, lean, white hair cropped close to his head, hands like cured leather. He wore the same 3 flannel shirts in rotation for as long as Charlotte knew him. Green plaid, blue plaid, and a brown one that he saved for church. He drove a 1991 Ford pickup that he kept running through sheer stubbornness and a standing account at the parts counter in Briar Hollow. He read the newspaper at the kitchen table every morning. He listened to the local AM station while he made coffee. He never raised his voice. He never lifted his hand against her. Not once. Not even close. On Saturday mornings, they went out to the workshop behind the house. The workshop wasn't the garage. The garage was different. The garage was the one with the steel door and the 6-digit lock, and Charlotte was not allowed inside it. Wendell had told her that on the first Saturday, and he had told her again at 12, and that was the only time he had ever said something twice. The workshop was the open shed off the back porch. The workshop was where he taught her. He taught her how to sand with the grain. He taught her how to measure twice. He taught her how to let a piece of wood sit for a day before cutting it, because wood moves when it wants to, and you don't get a vote. He taught her how to hold a chisel so the blade did the work and her hand did the steering. "You don't force a joint," he told her once when she was 8, when she had been trying to hammer 2 pieces of oak together that didn't quite fit. "If it doesn't slip in, you shave it down. You try again. You never hit it harder." She had tried to argue. She had been 8. 8-year-olds argue about everything. "But Granddaddy, the hammer makes it fit. The hammer makes it stop fighting. That's not the same thing." She had not understood that for a long time. She understood it now. She understood it last winter when she was sleeping behind a Dollar General with no jacket, and the temperature dropped to 28 degrees, and she had thought with sudden and frightening clarity that the hammer makes it stop fighting. That's not the same thing. The garage was at the back of the property. It was set apart from the workshop by a strip of gravel and a survey marker, and it sat on its own small piece of land that Wendell had purchased separately back in the 1980s, although Charlotte did not know that at the time and would not know it for years to come. The garage was 20 feet by 15, steel walls, steel door, no windows. A padlock on the front half the size of a man's fist with a 6-digit combination dial that had been turning for as long as Charlotte had been alive. She had asked about it once. She had been 11. She had been sitting on the back steps with Wendell eating ice cream out of a paper cup. The sun was going down behind the pines. The cicadas were loud. "Granddaddy." What's in the garage?" He had looked at her for a long moment. Not angry, just measuring something she couldn't see. "That's yours when you're ready." "When am I ready?" "You'll know. And if I don't know, then you're not." She had eaten the rest of her ice cream in silence. She had not asked again. She woke up under the overpass to the sound of a tractor trailer downshifting on the hill above her, and she realized she had slept with the box pressed against her chest. Raven was already up. He was standing at the edge of the concrete looking at the gray morning, his tail in a slow, uncertain sweep. The rain had stopped. The air had turned sharp. Charlotte could see her breath. Her jeans had stiffened at the knees. Her shoes were wet through. Her right hand had gone numb from sleeping on it. She sat up. She rubbed her face. She looked at the box in her lap. She blinked. Something was wrong with it. The felt lining had come unglued at one corner. The bottom panel, which had always sat flush, had warped slightly, pulling away from the base. Water had gotten under the felt during the night. The lining was peeling up like a sticker that someone had tried to remove from a window. Charlotte picked at it. She didn't mean to. It was a reflex. The same reflex that makes you pick at a hangnail or push your tongue against a sore tooth. She lifted the felt with her thumbnail, and then she stopped breathing. Because there were numbers under the felt. 6 of them. Carved into the raw wood with the tip of a chisel. 6 digits. Wendell's handwriting. She knew his handwriting. She knew it better than she knew her own. She had seen it on grocery lists and on the labels of mason jars in the workshop, and in the margins of the old woodworking books he kept on the shelf above his bed. She had seen it on birthday cards. She had seen it on the note he taped to her lunchbox every morning of 4th grade. Usually one word, usually something like brave or patient or good, and she had seen it on the inside cover of the dictionary he gave her for her 10th birthday, where he had written for the girl who asked the right questions. She knew that handwriting. This was that handwriting. 6 digits, carved, hidden. Under the felt of a box he had given her for her 16th birthday. The garage padlock had a 6-digit combination. Charlotte's hands began to shake. Raven looked up at her. She didn't move for a long time. She sat there on the cold concrete with the box in her lap and the wet air on her face, and her mind tried to do 3 things at once and failed at all 3. The first thing it tried to do was deny what she was seeing. The second thing it tried to do was figure out when Wendell had hidden the numbers there, which had to have been before her 16th birthday, which meant he had been planning this for at least a year before he died, maybe longer. The third thing it tried to do was understand what kind of grandfather hides a combination under the felt of a birthday gift for a 16-year-old girl and waits and dies and waits. The third thing was the one she could not finish, because she already knew, because Wendell had said it, hadn't he? That's yours when you're ready. She had been carrying the key for 4 years. She had carried it through the funeral. She had carried it through the 3 weeks of Marshall changing the locks. She had carried it through Christmas on the basement couch at her friend Sophie's house. She had carried it through senior year and graduation and the summer she lost her phone and the August Raven found her. She had carried it through every overpass and every parking lot and every gas station bathroom. The combination had been 6 inches from her hand for 4 years. She pressed her palm against her mouth. She did not cry. She had cried herself out a long time ago. Instead, she stood up. Raven. The dog stood immediately. We're going home. She had to walk it. There was no bus that ran from the overpass out to the old Whitfield property, and even if there had been, she didn't have the fare. The property was 12 miles southeast of town, out past the new subdivisions where the streetlights ended, and the 2-lane road started winding through pine. She had walked it before, back when she was a kid and missed the school bus, back when Wendell had been waiting at home with the porch light on, and she had walked the last mile humming because she could already smell the cornbread. This was a different walk. The sun came up gray. The rain held off. She walked with Raven beside her, his head low, his ears flat against the wind. The first hour, her shoes squelched with every step. The second hour, her shoes started to dry. The third hour, she stopped being able to feel her toes, which she decided was probably better than feeling them. She passed the Citgo where she had met Raven. She passed the church on the corner of Route 9 and Old Mill Road where the marquee said, "God's mercy is new every morning" in plastic black letters. She passed the diner where she had worked for 9 days in May. Nobody looked at her. That was the thing about being homeless. People stopped looking at you. It wasn't cruelty exactly. It was more like a survival mechanism. If you looked, you might have to do something. If you did something, you might have to keep doing it. So most people kept their eyes on the windshield, and Charlotte kept her eyes on the road, and the world kept turning. By mile 8, she was lightheaded. She had eaten half a granola bar yesterday and nothing else. She made herself keep walking. She thought about Wendell while she walked. She couldn't help it. She thought about the way he poured coffee slowly into the same chipped mug, exactly to the 3rd ring from the bottom. She thought about the way he said her name, Charlotte, always Charlotte, Never Charlie, except in his own private journal, which she would not know about until later. She thought about the time she was 9, and she had broken a coffee cup he had owned since before she was born, and she had hidden the pieces under her bed for 2 days, because she was afraid he would be angry, and when he finally found them, he had sat down on the edge of her mattress and said, "Charlotte, I am never going to be angry at you for breaking a thing. People break things. That's how the world works. I will be sad if you lie to me, but I will not be angry if you break a cup." She had never lied to him after that. Not once. She thought about the day Wendell died. She had been at school. She had been sitting in fifth period English, and they had been reading a poem about a man who walked into the woods and didn't come back. And Mrs. Halliburton had been trying to explain what the poem meant when the principal's voice came over the intercom and asked for Charlotte Whitfield to please come to the office. She had known. She had known before she stood up. She had walked down the hallway with her backpack on one shoulder, and she had pushed open the door of the front office, and Greta Halloran had been standing there. Greta, their neighbor, the widow from a quarter-mile down the road. Greta had been crying, and Charlotte had not needed to be told. She had just said, "Where?" And Greta had said, "His garden. He was working on the tomato cages." She had not cried then. She had not cried at the funeral. She had not cried when her Uncle Marshall put his hand on her shoulder in the parking lot and said, "We'll take care of you, buddy." She had not cried when she came home from school 3 weeks later and found her clothes in 3 cardboard boxes on the porch. The first time she had cried was 4 months later in the bathroom of a McDonald's outside of Wilson, when the soap dispenser broke off in her hand and she stood there holding it and could not figure out what to do with it. She had cried for an hour. Then she had thrown the soap dispenser in the trash and washed her hands with water. She reached the property a little after 11 in the morning. The old farmhouse was the first thing she saw. She had not seen it in 2 years. Somebody else was living there now. The Whitfields had sold it the spring after Wendell died, after Marshall had cleared it of anything worth selling, and the new owners had repainted the shutters dark blue and put a wooden swing on the front porch and parked a silver minivan in the driveway. There were toys on the lawn, a red plastic tricycle, a soccer ball. Somebody had hung a wreath of dried hydrangeas on the front door. Somebody else's life. In her grandfather's house. Charlotte stood at the edge of the road for a long time, and she did not let herself look at the front window where she used to wait for her father to come back. She did not let herself look at the porch where Wendell had taught her how to whittle. She did not let herself look at the side yard where she had built her first birdhouse with him when she was 8. She walked around the property line, through the wet grass, past the workshop, which was dark and seemed smaller than she remembered. Everything seemed smaller now, except the things that mattered. The garage stood where it had always stood, at the back of the lot, behind a line of pines, on its own narrow strip of land that nobody apparently had ever bothered to untangle from the deed. The steel door looked exactly the same, no windows, no marks. The padlock hung from the hasp, dull with surface rust on the outside but solid underneath. Wendell built things to last. That was the one true thing about him that everybody in Briar Hollow knew. The pastor at his funeral had even worked it into the eulogy. If Wendell Whitfield built it, you could lean on it. Charlotte stood in front of the door. Raven sat beside her, his ears forward, watching the dark steel. She pulled the wooden box out of her backpack. She tilted it toward the light. She read the numbers one more time. She didn't need to. She had memorized them on the walk. She had recited them in her head with every step for 12 miles. But she read them anyway because Wendell had taught her to measure twice. She reached for the lock. The dial was stiff. She had to grip it with both hands. Left, right, left again. Slow, careful. The way he had taught her to do everything that mattered. She landed on the last number. She felt a small, clean click beneath her thumb. The shackle released. Charlotte pulled the lock free. She set it down on the concrete pad. She put her hand on the door handle. Cold iron, rough with weather. She pulled. The door groaned against the seal. It had not been opened in 3 years, maybe longer, maybe much longer. The hinges fought her for a second, and then they gave and the door swung outward, heavy and slow, and it stopped against the weeds that had grown thick along the wall. And from the darkness came a smell that stopped Charlotte where she stood. Sawdust. Clean, dry, undisturbed sawdust. And underneath it, linseed oil, and underneath that, cedar. It hit her all at once and her throat went tight because she knew that smell. It was the smell of Wendell's hands after a Saturday in the workshop. It was the smell of the kitchen table where he used to set his coffee mug while a finish dried. It was the smell of his shirts when she did the laundry in 7th grade. It was the smell of every good thing she had ever lost. She stood at the threshold. She did not move. Raven moved first. He nosed past her into the dark and his nails clicked on the concrete, and he disappeared into the smell. Charlotte reached for her phone. 2% battery. She turned on the flashlight. She held it up. The beam swept the back wall and her breath caught. Tools. Hundreds of them. Hanging on white pegboard that ran floor to ceiling across the entire wall. Chisels, hand planes, clamps, saws, mallets, augers. Things she did not have names for. Each one outlined in black marker so you could tell at a glance where it belonged. Each one with a small handwritten label beneath it in her grandfather's careful slanted script. Nothing was missing. Nothing was out of place. The pegboard looked like it had been organized that morning by a man who cared about every single tool he owned and knew exactly where each one should live. She moved the light. A workbench. Heavy. At least 8 feet long. Solid maple. A wooden vise on the near end. And on the surface, in the exact center of the bench, a leather-bound journal. A carpenter's pencil laid across the cover. She moved the light again, and there in the far corner of the garage were 6 large shapes. 6. Arranged carefully, spaced evenly, covered with canvas drop cloths, like furniture waiting in a showroom, like something somebody had set up. For somebody. For her. Her phone screen dimmed. 2% became 1. She had time for one more sweep. She turned the light slowly across the room workbench, pegboard-shaped ceiling, and just before the flashlight cut out, she saw on the wall above the door a small wooden plaque. Hand-carved letters, a single line of text. She didn't have time to read it before the phone died. The garage went black. Charlotte stood in total darkness. She listened. She could hear Raven breathing. She could hear her own heartbeat. She could smell sawdust and linseed oil and cedar, and underneath all of it, something else. Something that had been waiting in here for a long time. The smell of a person who is gone, but who left their hands all over a room. She lowered herself to the concrete floor. Slow, knees first. Then she sat. Raven came back to her in the dark and pressed against her side. He had never climbed into her lap before. He was 30 pounds too big for it. But he climbed into her lap now, slow and deliberate, and he laid his head against her collarbone, and she put both arms around him and held on like he was the only solid thing left in the world. Which, in a way, he was. She didn't cry. She wanted to. She thought she might. But what came out instead was something smaller and stranger. A sound she had never made before. Halfway between a breath and a word. She said it out loud to the dark, to the dog, to her grandfather, to nobody. Granddaddy. Just that, one word. The sawdust caught it and held it, and then very quietly in a voice she had not used in 3 years, she said the second thing. I'm here. She slept on the floor. She didn't mean to. She had meant to get up and look at the shapes in the corner and read the journal and find a light source and start counting. She had meant to do all of that, but the moment her head touched the concrete, the last 16 months of sleeping outside caught up with her at once, and she went down hard, and she did not wake up until morning. When she woke, she was warm, which was the strangest part. She had not been warm in so long that for a moment she thought she had died in the night. She had not died. Raven was lying on top of her legs, and somebody had put a blanket over her. Charlotte sat up slowly. The blanket slid off her shoulders. It was wool, brown and gray, heavy, old. The kind of blanket someone keeps in the back of a truck for emergencies. She turned it in her hands and a small white tag at one corner said, G. Halloran, in faded ballpoint pen. Greta, the neighbor. Charlotte looked toward the open garage door. Greta Halloran was standing there. She had a thermos in one hand and a paper grocery bag in the other. She was 68 years old, short white-haired, and built like a woman who had spent her life carrying things heavier than she should have. She was wearing a quilted jacket over a flannel shirt and rubber boots caked with the kind of mud you only get from a vegetable garden in November. Her eyes were sharp. They had always been sharp. She was looking past Charlotte into the garage. She had stopped at the threshold. She wasn't looking at the tools. She wasn't looking at the workbench. She was looking at the 6 canvas-covered shapes in the corner. and her face had gone the color of paper. Greta did not speak for a long time. Charlotte watched her. She watched the older woman's eyes move from one shape to the next and stop at the largest one, the one against the back wall. She watched Greta's mouth open, then close, then open again. When Greta finally spoke, her voice was not the voice Charlotte had grown up hearing. It was smaller, younger somehow, the voice of a woman who had just been told something she should have known a long time ago. "Wendell," she said, just his name. She put a hand against the doorframe to steady herself. Charlotte stood up. The blanket fell from her lap. Raven stood too and put himself between the two women, not in warning, but in care, the way good dogs do. "Mrs. Halloran." "Oh, child. I'm sorry. I didn't know where else to go." Greta turned her head, slowly, like she was pulling her eyes off something that did not want to be looked away from. She looked at Charlotte, really looked at her. The wet jacket, the pale face, the thin shoulders. The way she was standing halfway between a girl and a woman in the doorway of her grandfather's secret. Greta took a step into the garage, then another. She set the thermos on the workbench. She set the paper bag next to it. She looked at the canvas-covered shapes one more time, and then she looked at Charlotte, and her eyes filled with tears that did not fall. "Sit down, sweetheart." Sit down." Charlotte sat. Greta poured coffee into the lid of the thermos. Black, strong, the way Wendell used to make it. She handed it to Charlotte with both hands like it was a small ceremony, like the cup itself was a thing of importance. Charlotte took it. Her hands were shaking. "Drink." She drank. The coffee was so hot it hurt her teeth, and so good it nearly undid her. Greta sat down on an overturned wooden crate by the door. She folded her hands in her lap. She looked at the shapes in the corner. She looked at the pegboard. She looked at the workbench. She looked at the journal. She shook her head slowly. "Oh, Wendell." "Mrs. Halloran, what is this?" Greta turned her eyes back to Charlotte. "Child, what is this place?" Greta took a long breath. Then she said the thing that would change everything. "Your grandfather wasn't just a carpenter, Charlotte." Charlotte waited. Greta's hand tightened around her own wrist. "Your grandfather was the man this whole county has been looking for 30 years. And nobody knew it. Not me. Not the people who bought his work. Not even your father and your uncle. Not even him half the time, I think. He hid it. He hid it so well that he hid it from himself." "I don't understand." "You will." Greta looked at the canvas-covered shapes one more time. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, her voice was steady again. "Child, listen to me. You are going to need to be very brave for the next few days. You are going to learn some things about your grandfather that he kept hidden for a reason. And when you learn them, you are not going to be the same girl who walked through that door last night. Do you understand me?" Charlotte did not understand. Not yet. But she nodded. Because Wendell had taught her that when an older person tells you to listen, you listen. Greta stood up. She crossed the garage. She stopped at the largest of the canvas-covered shapes, the one against the back wall. She put her hand on the canvas. She closed her eyes again, just for a second, and then she pulled the cloth away from the second largest shape instead, leaving the biggest one still covered. The canvas fell to the floor in a slow, soft motion, and Charlotte saw. She saw what her grandfather had been hiding. She saw what he had been building. She saw what he had been waiting all those years to give her. And she did not know yet, could not have known yet, that she was looking at only the smallest piece of the truth. That under the floor of this garage, behind a key she had not yet found, in the pages of a journal she had not yet opened, in the voice of a woman she had not seen in 16 years, in the trembling hands of a father she had not forgiven, there were 6 more secrets waiting, 6 more doors, 6 more locks. And Charlotte Rose Whitfield, 20 years old, $14 in her pocket, sleeping in her grandfather's garage, with a stray dog and a stolen blanket, was about to open every single one of them. The canvas hit the floor, and Charlotte saw it. A rocking chair. Walnut. Dark and warm and so smooth it looked wet. The arms curved down to gentle points. The runners swept back from the legs in a single clean line. The seat was scoop-shaped to fit a human body, and the back rose up in a slow, patient arc, the kind of arc you could fall asleep against. She did not move. She just looked. Greta stepped back from the chair the way you step back from an altar. "He built this." Charlotte nodded. She couldn't speak, because she had touched her grandfather's work her whole life. Birdhouses, cutting boards, the little shelf in the kitchen for the spice jars, a footstool he had made her when she was 7. Those things were good. Those things were Saturday morning good. This was not Saturday morning good. This was something else. This was the kind of chair you saw in a museum. Greta lifted the next canvas. Slow. Careful. Like she was afraid of what she was about to find. A dining table. Oak. 7 feet long. The top made from a single wide board, the grain running the full length without a break, like it had come from a tree that grew with this exact table already inside it. The next one. 4 matching ladder-back chairs. The next one. A writing desk in cherry wood, darker at the edges. 2 drawers brass pulls cold to the touch. The next one. A hope chest. Cedar. The front panel carved with overlapping leaves. The last one was the largest. It was against the back wall. Greta walked toward it slowly. She put her hand on the canvas. She paused. She didn't pull it off. "Not this one yet," she said. Charlotte looked at her. "Why not?" "Because I think your grandfather wanted you to find it on your own. And I have a feeling about what's under there. And if I'm right," Greta let the sentence end, "I'm going to let you find it." Charlotte did not push. She had spent enough time with old people to know when an old person was protecting you from something you weren't ready for. She let it stay covered. Greta drove her into town that afternoon. The truck was an old Chevy with a heater that worked on its own schedule and a passenger seat that smelled like a Labrador Retriever Greta had owned in 2008. Raven curled up between Charlotte's feet. The radio was tuned to an AM station, playing hymns at low volume. Greta did not turn it off. Charlotte did not ask her to. They drove past the diner, past the gas station, past the Methodist church on Main Street with the white steeple and the announcement board that said, "Service 10 a.m. all are welcome." Greta did not look at the church, but her hands tightened on the wheel as they passed it. Charlotte noticed. She did not ask. Theodore Brennan ran a furniture shop on the corner of Main and 2nd. The sign was hand-painted. Brennan Fine Woodwork. The front window was crowded with tables and bookshelves and a tall clock that did not run anymore, but that Teddy kept anyway, because he said broken clocks were good for business. They made customers feel like time was a thing you could fix. Teddy was 61, lean, sawdust on his sleeves, reading glasses on top of his head. He was refinishing a dresser when the bell over the door rang and Greta walked in. He looked up. He saw Charlotte behind her. He set down his sandpaper. "Greta." "Teddy." "Who's this?" "This is Charlotte Whitfield." Teddy went still. "Wendell's granddaughter." "That's right." He looked at Charlotte for a long second. Then he looked at the ladder-back chair Charlotte was carrying. Then he looked at Greta. Then he looked back at the chair. He took it from Charlotte without asking. He set it on the floor in the middle of his shop. He crouched beside it. He didn't speak. Charlotte watched him. He pressed the joints with his thumbs. He tipped the chair at an angle and sighted down the legs. He ran his hands over the rush seat. He turned the chair upside down. He ran his finger along the underside of the seat until he found something. A mark. A signature. He stopped. He went still. He looked up at Charlotte. His eyes had changed. "Where did you get this?" "My grandfather made it." "I know he did." "Then why are you asking?" "Because I need to hear you say it again." Charlotte said it again. "He made it." Teddy sat down on the floor. Just sat. A grown man 61 years old sat down on his own shop floor next to a chair, and he put his hand over his mouth and he stared at it like he was looking at something he had been waiting his entire professional life to see. Greta did not say anything. She let him have it. When he finally lowered his hand, he was smiling. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who has just learned that something he loved was always closer than he thought. "How many," he said. Charlotte blinked. "How many what? How many pieces does that garage hold?" "6. One of them is still covered." "6. Yes." Teddy let out a breath that sounded like it had been waiting 40 years. Charlotte. "Yes, sir." "Your grandfather is W. Whitfield." "He's just granddaddy." "No, he is W. Whitfield. The W. Whitfield. Collectors across this state have been hunting for pieces signed with that name for 30 years. I have handled 3 of them in my entire career. 3. A side table that sold for $3,200, a jewelry box that sold for $900, and a serving tray that I sold to a woman in Asheville for 2,000 and watched her cry while she paid me. Charlotte did not say anything. That chair on the floor, Teddy said. That chair alone, with provenance 3,000, maybe more. The dining table, if it's what I think it is, could be 25. The hope chest, depending on the carving, 15. The desk, 12. The rocking chair, child. The rocking chair could be the most valuable piece of furniture in the state of North Carolina. Charlotte sat down on the floor next to him. She did not mean to. Her legs just gave out. Greta put a hand on her shoulder. Teddy turned to face her. But Charlotte, listen to me. The money isn't the point. The money is never the point. The point is that your grandfather chose to be anonymous. He could have been famous. He could have been wealthy. He chose neither. He chose to make beautiful things and put them in the world without his face on them. Do you understand what that means? No, sir. It means he was a craftsman, not a salesman. There's a difference. There aren't very many of him left. Charlotte nodded. She did not trust her voice. Teddy stood up. He brushed off his knees. He put his glasses on. He looked at the chair one more time. Then he looked at Charlotte. You're staying with Greta? Yes, sir. Good. Don't sell those pieces until you understand what you have. I'll help you. I'll find them homes. But not yet. Not until you've sat with them. Do you hear me? Yes, sir. And Charlotte? Yes, sir. Welcome home. Greta had a guest room. It was small. Yellow walls. A single bed with a quilted comforter. A nightstand with a Bible and a small lamp. A window that looked out at a tomato garden that Greta had not gotten around to clearing for winter. That night, Charlotte took her first hot shower in 14 weeks. She stood under the water for 40 minutes. Long after the steam had filled the bathroom and fogged the mirror, long after her skin had turned pink, long after Greta had knocked twice on the door to make sure she was alive, Charlotte stood there with the water running over her face and let herself cry. She cried for the kitchen with the radio on. She cried for the chipped coffee mug. She cried for the lunchbox notes. She cried for the broken cup she had hidden under her bed. She cried for the night under the McDonald's bathroom soap dispenser. She cried for the box. She cried for the lock. She cried for the chair. When she finally turned off the water and wrapped herself in a towel, Raven was lying outside the bathroom door, his chin on his paws, waiting. She knelt down next to him. She pressed her forehead against his. He did not move. Greta cooked dinner, chicken and dumplings, cornbread, green beans from a jar she had canned in August. Charlotte ate 3 bowls. She had not eaten 3 bowls of anything in 2 years. Greta watched her eat. She did not say anything until Charlotte set her spoon down. Then she poured them both coffee. She sat across the table. She looked at Charlotte for a long time. He used to fix my fence. Granddaddy, for almost 9 years. Why? Because my husband died in the spring of 2013, and the fence started leaning the summer after the funeral. And one Saturday morning, Wendell showed up with a level and a bag of bolts and said, Greta, the fence leans west. I'll be here on Saturdays until it doesn't. Greta paused. He came every Saturday until the morning he died. He never told me. He wouldn't have. Did you pay him? I tried. What did he say? Greta smiled. He said, Greta, I'm not fixing your fence. I'm visiting my friend. The fence is just where I do my visiting. Charlotte put her hands flat on the table. She did not cry. She had cried enough for one day. But she sat there for a long time looking at her own hands, which were Wendell's hands, which she had not noticed before, and she thought about a fence that leaned and a Saturday morning and a man with a level and a woman who had needed him. The next morning, Charlotte went back to the garage. She didn't take her phone. She didn't take anything except the journal. She sat down on the concrete floor with her back against the workbench and Raven beside her, and she opened to the first page. If you're reading this, Charlotte, then I'm gone and you found the combination. Good. That means you were ready, even if it doesn't feel like it yet. I wrote this journal for you, not all at once, over a lot of years. Some of it is about wood, some of it is about other things. Most of it is the things I wished I had more Saturdays to teach you. Start with the chisel cabinet. Second shelf left side, there's a set of Japanese water stones in there. You'll wreck the first one. That's fine. There are 3 more behind it. Charlotte stopped reading. She got up. She walked to the chisel cabinet. She opened it. Second shelf, left side. There they were, 3 water stones wrapped in cloth, and behind them, just like he said, 3 more. She started to laugh. She didn't mean to. The laugh came out of her in a small, surprised burst, and Raven looked up at her, his head tilted, and she put her hand over her mouth and laughed harder. He had known. He had known she would check. She sat back down and kept reading. The journal went on for pages, dozens of them. Wendell's handwriting steady and unhurried, teaching and remembering in the same breath. A chair is only as strong as its weakest joint. If you have to hide a joint with glue, you didn't cut it right. Fix it or start over. Glue is not a bandage. I started the dining table the year you came to live with me. I wanted to build something big enough for a family to sit around. It took me 3 years to finish. By then it was just you and me, and we ate at the kitchen table with the radio on. I never brought the dining table out, but I didn't build it for nothing. I built it because it needed to exist. Your Uncle Marshall came to see me the year before you moved in, wanted me to co-sign a business loan. I said no. He didn't speak to me after that. Not for a long time. I didn't lose any sleep over it. Charlotte turned the page, and then she stopped. Because halfway down the next page, written in slightly smaller handwriting, was a paragraph that made the room go very quiet. Your mother came back once. You were 4. It was August. She knocked on the door at 11 o'clock at night. She had been driving for 2 days. She was thinner than I remembered. She was sober. She told me she had been sober for 91 days. She wanted to see you. I told her no. I told her she could not come in. I told her to come back when she had a year. When she had 3 years. When she had something solid to give a 4-year-old little girl besides a face she couldn't remember. She stood on my porch and cried Charlotte. She cried for almost an hour, and I did not let her in. I have thought about that night every week for 16 years. Maybe I was right. 91 days is not very long. People relapse. People disappear again. I did not want you to wake up at 4 years old and meet a mother who would be gone again by the time you were 5. I had watched your father do that to you. I could not let her do it too. But maybe I was wrong. Maybe 91 days was the beginning of something. Maybe I took something from her that I had no right to take. I don't know, Charlotte. I have made many decisions in my life that I am proud of. That one I am not. If she ever comes back, and she might listen before you decide. People can change. I have lived long enough to know that. I have also lived long enough to know that they often don't. You will have to make your own decision. I cannot make it for you. But listen first. Listen. Charlotte closed the journal. She held it against her chest. She did not cry. She just sat there, and the morning light came through the open garage door, and Raven pressed his shoulder against her thigh, and somewhere in the distance a dog barked, and somewhere closer a cardinal called, and Charlotte sat on the concrete floor of her grandfather's secret room and tried to make sense of the fact that her mother had once stood on a porch and cried for an hour. For her. For her. 3 days later, the pastor came. His name was Calvin Reed. He had been the pastor of the Briar Hollow Methodist Church for 26 years. He was 65, gray-haired, with the kind of face that made strangers tell him their problems in checkout lines. He drove a Ford Taurus that was older than most of his congregation's children, and he kept a Bible on the passenger seat and a roll of peppermints in the glove compartment for parishioners who showed up to his office crying. He pulled into Greta's driveway on a Tuesday afternoon. Charlotte watched him through the kitchen window. He got out of the car carrying a small wooden table. She knew that table before he reached the porch. She knew it the way you know a voice on the phone before the person says their name. Wendell had made it. She opened the front door. Pastor Calvin stopped halfway up the steps. He set the table down on the porch. He took off his hat. Charlotte. Pastor, I brought you something. I see. Your grandfather built this for the church office 20 years ago. I asked him what he wanted for it. He said, Calvin, you put it where people can rest their elbows. That's payment enough. So that's what I did. Every grieving widow who came into my office for 20 years rested her elbows on this table while she cried. Charlotte did not say anything. I want you to have it. Pastor, I can't. You can. And you will. Your grandfather is the reason this table exists. You are the reason it should keep existing somewhere that loves him. He picked it up again. He carried it into Greta's living room. He set it down by the window. He looked at it for a moment. Then he turned to Charlotte. Will you come to church on Sunday? Charlotte hesitated. She had not been to church in 2 years. She was not sure she remembered how to go. She was not sure she still believed in the kind of God who had let Wendell die in a tomato garden in September. She was not sure she still believed in much of anything, but she looked at Pastor Calvin's face, and she looked at the table, and she thought of Wendell in his green plaid shirt in the third pew from the back. She said yes. Sunday came. She wore one of Greta's old dresses. The whole congregation looked up when she walked in. They did not stare. They were Southern. Southern people do not stare at the grieving. They simply made room. An old woman named Edith Mosby slid down the pew to give her space. Another woman, whose name Charlotte could not remember from her childhood, leaned over and squeezed her hand. A man in a suit who had been a deacon for 30 years nodded at her like she had never been gone. She sat down in Wendell's pew, third from the back. She did not cry during the service. She did not cry during the hymns. She did not cry when Pastor Calvin's sermon was about the parable of the lost coin and the woman who lit a lamp and swept her whole house until she found what she was looking for. She cried after, in the church parking lot, when an old woman she did not recognize walked up to her, took both of her hands and said, "Honey, your grandfather prayed for you every single Sunday from the day you came to live with him. Every Sunday, for 11 years. I just thought you ought to know." The metal box was the next thing. Charlotte had been seeing it for days, pushed flat against the back wall behind the workbench, half covered by a fold of canvas tarp. Small, gray, heavy. A keyhole on the front no bigger than her pinky nail. She had tried to open it on the second day. It would not open. She had searched everywhere. The pegboard, the workbench drawers, the shelves above the clamps, the chisel cabinet, under the bench, in the jars of screws and dowels, even in the journal between pages in case Wendell had hidden the key in the paper. Nothing. She had been ready to give up. Until she opened the journal again that night, and she found the entry. "I put the important things where you'd only find them if you were paying attention. Not hidden, just quiet." Charlotte stopped breathing. She read it again. Not hidden, just quiet. She closed the journal slowly. She stood up. She walked across the garage. She stopped in front of the rocking chair. She put her hand on the arm. She had been looking in cabinets. She had been looking in drawers. She had been looking like a person looks for keys. She had not been paying attention. She knelt down. She tipped the chair onto its side. Then she turned it upside down on the blanket, resting it on its arms, so the underside of the seat was facing up. She ran her fingertips across the wood. Slowly. The way Wendell had taught her to check a surface for flaws. She moved from the center of the seat outward, along the grain, feeling for any break in the finish, any seam, any whisper of a difference. Near the back edge, where the seat met the rear support rail. There, a section of wood that felt different. Same color, same grain direction, but the texture was a hair smoother than the surrounding surface, like it had been finished separately, like it had been sanded by a different hand on a different day. She leaned closer. In the lamplight, she could just barely see it, a hairline seam, no wider than a pencil mark, forming a rectangle about the size of a playing card. She pressed it with her thumb. The panel shifted. She pressed again, harder, and it popped free on a tiny brass hinge no bigger than a fingernail, swinging downward to reveal a cavity in the seat no deeper than an inch. Inside was a key, brass, small, darkened with age, solid. She picked it up. She sat back on her heels. She held the key in her open palm, and she said to nobody in the empty garage, "Oh, Granddaddy, just that." The metal box clicked open on the first try. Inside were three things: a folded document on heavy paper with a blue legal cover, a small brown bank book with a rubber band around it, a sealed white envelope with her name on the front in Wendell's handwriting. Charlotte, just that. Charlotte. She opened the document first. A trust. 3.5 acres of land with a cabin on County Road 22, 20 miles north of town. Purchased in 2012 with cash. Held in a trust set up at a law firm in Raleigh. Trustee and attorney named Marion Bishop. Beneficiary Charlotte Rose Whitfield. Charlotte did the math. She had been 6. Wendell had bought the cabin the same year he took her in. He had been planning for this since the very beginning. She slid the rubber band off the bank book. A credit union she had never heard of. Joint account. Wendell Whitfield and Charlotte Whitfield. Opened in 2014. Charlotte had been 8. Deposits going back almost 9 years. Small, regular, like clockwork. $20, 30, 50 on a good month. The last entry was dated 2 months before Wendell died. The balance, $52,840. Charlotte set the bank book down on her knee. She did not pick it back up for a long time. She picked up the envelope instead. Dear Charlotte, if you're reading this, then things went the way I thought they would. I'm sorry about that. I hoped I was wrong about your father and your uncle, but I've known them a long time, and hope is not the same thing as evidence. Here's what's in this box. The deed is for 3.5 acres with a cabin on County Road 22. I bought the land with cash in 2012. I put it in a trust with your name. Your father doesn't know. Your uncle doesn't know. Nobody knows except the lawyer who wrote the papers and me. Now you. The bank book is yours. The account has been in your name since you were 8. I put money in every month for years. Not a lot each time, but steady money adds up when you leave it alone. It is not a fortune, but it is enough to start. Now, here is the part I need you to hear because it is the only thing in this box that matters. I didn't leave you money, Charlotte. I left you hands. The money will get spent. That's what money does. The cabin will need fixing. But the tools on that pegboard and the lessons in this journal are yours forever. Nobody can take a skill away from you. Nobody can file a claim on what you know how to do with a piece of wood and a sharp chisel. I watched your father and your uncle for a long time. I saw who they were becoming. I knew what they'd do when I was gone. They'd take the house and the truck and whatever else was easy to carry. That's who they are. I couldn't change them, but I could make sure they didn't get everything. They took what they could see, child. I saved what they couldn't. Learn the trade, use the tools, build something. Start with something small and get it right. Then build something bigger. That's all I ever wanted to tell you. And I ran out of Saturdays to say it. I love you. I should have said it more. I figured the birdhouses and the Saturday mornings said it well enough. But a man shouldn't leave that kind of thing to guesswork. Now go sharpen the number 4 chisel. The edge has been sitting too long. Granddaddy. She read it 3 times. She did not cry on the first reading. She did not cry on the second. On the third, she pressed both palms against her eyes and held them there until the wet stopped coming. Then she stood up. She walked to the pegboard. She took the number 4 chisel from its hook. She sharpened it. Word travels in a small town. That was the part Wendell had not warned her about. Somebody at the hardware store mentioned to somebody at the diner that Wendell Whitfield's granddaughter was staying with Greta Halloran. Somebody at the diner mentioned it to somebody at the post office. Somebody at the post office mentioned it to a woman who was married to a man who used to play cards with Marshall Whitfield on Friday nights. It took 8 days for the story to reach Marshall. On the 9th day, his silver truck pulled into Greta's driveway. Charlotte was on the porch. She saw the truck before she saw the man. Her stomach did something she had not felt in 3 years. Marshall got out of the driver's side. He was alone. He was bigger than she remembered. Heavier. The kind of weight a man puts on when he stops moving but doesn't stop eating. He was wearing a windbreaker and jeans and the same expression he had worn at the funeral, which was the expression of a man who had walked into a room and already decided who in it was useful and who in it was in his way. He walked up the porch steps. He stopped at the top. He looked at Charlotte. "Hello, buddy." Charlotte did not stand up. She did not say hello. She put her hand on Raven's head. Raven did not growl. Raven did better than growl. Raven did not move at all. Marshall sat down on the porch swing without being invited. The swing creaked under him. He looked out at Greta's yard like he was assessing it. "I hear you've been spending time at the old property." "Some? I hear you opened the garage." "That's right." "How?" "I had the combination." "Where did you get the combination?" "He gave it to me." "When?" "Years ago." Marshall let that sit. He was watching her sideways. He was watching the way a card player watches the dealer's hands. "That property was supposed to go through probate. The garage isn't on that property." "What?" "The garage sits on a separate parcel. He bought it in 1984. It's not part of the estate." A muscle in Marshall's jaw moved. "Says who?" "Says the deed." "You've seen the deed." "I have." "Show me." "No." Marshall turned to face her. His face had changed. The good-natured uncle look was gone. What was underneath it was not surprising to her. It was only surprising that he had bothered to wear the mask in the first place. She had seen this face once before in the parking lot of Wendell's funeral for half a second when he thought she wasn't looking. Listen, Charlotte. I'm listening. You're a kid. I'm 20. You're a kid. You don't understand how these things work. There are laws. There are processes. You can't just walk into a garage and decide what's yours. He decided. He was sick at the end. He died in his garden. He was sick before that. He wasn't. You don't know that. I lived with him. You didn't. Marshall stood up. He walked to the porch rail. He put both hands on it. He looked out at the road. Your father told me you might be difficult. My father hasn't seen me in 2 years. He still talks about you. To who? To me. Funny he doesn't talk to me. Marshall turned around. He smiled. It was not a good smile. You know what your problem is, buddy. Don't call me buddy. Your problem is you're the daughter of a drunk and a woman who walked out on you. You've been sleeping in parking lots for 2 years. You show up here with a dog and a story, and you think a judge is going to take your word over mine? He let that sit. Charlotte did not blink. There's not going to be a judge, she said. There will be. I'll see to it. You can try. I will try. And you'll lose. Marshall stepped close, closer than a person should step. Raven stood up. Marshall noticed. He stopped. Charlotte did not look at the dog. She looked at her uncle. She kept her eyes on his face. She kept her voice level. She kept her hands on the arm of her chair. Marshall. Yes. You came to this porch because you thought you could scare me. I came to talk. You came to scare me. And the reason I know that is because if you had come to talk, you would have called first. His jaw moved again. You'll be hearing from my lawyer. Okay. This isn't over, Charlotte. Yes, it is. He left. The truck pulled out of Greta's driveway. The gravel cracked under the tires. Charlotte sat on the porch and did not move for a long time. Her hands had started shaking, not from fear, from the kind of leftover adrenaline that comes after a thing is done. Raven climbed into her lap. He was 30 pounds too big for it. He climbed in anyway. Greta came out with a glass of sweet tea. She set it on the rail. She sat down in the chair next to Charlotte. She did not say anything for a long time. Finally, you did good, child. I was scared. I know. How could you tell? Because I was scared too, from the kitchen window. Charlotte laughed. It came out wet, but it came out. The next day, Charlotte drove to County Road 22. Greta let her take the truck. The cabin was at the end of a quarter-mile dirt track that cut through pine and hardwood. The mailbox at the road had no name on it. The track had ruts. The truck bounced. Raven sat in the passenger seat with his nose out the window. The cabin appeared in a clearing. Small. One room, a covered porch on the front, a lean-to off the side. The roof was metal gone orange with rust. The porch sagged on the left where rain had been collecting. The steps had weeds growing through them. It was a wreck. It was hers. Charlotte sat in the truck for a full minute before she got out. She walked up the porch. She tested each board with her weight. The door was unlocked. She pushed it open. Inside. One room. A wood stove in the corner. A counter along the back wall. A small bathroom. Bare studs in some places. Drywall in others. Half finished. On the shelf above the counter, 3 glass mason jars. Nails. Screws. Wood glue. The same kind of jars Wendell kept in his workshop. Charlotte stood in the middle of the room and turned slowly a full circle. She said out loud to the dog who had followed her in, "This is mine." Raven looked at her. "This is mine." She said it again because she didn't believe it the first time. She came back to Greta's that evening. Greta was on the couch. The television was on low. Greta's face when she looked up was wrong. Charlotte stopped in the doorway. "What? Your father came by." "What? This afternoon?" Was he was sober, or close to it. His hands were shaking a little, but he was sober. What did he want? He didn't come in. He stood on the porch. He left this. Greta held out a piece of folded notebook paper. Charlotte unfolded it. The handwriting was not Wendell's. It was rougher, uneven. The hand of a man who had not written anything by hand in a long time. Charlotte. I won't come inside. I won't ask anything. I just want to say one thing. Your mother is alive. She's been sober 8 years. She got a letter last week. Your grandfather wrote it 3 years ago. The post office sent it to the wrong address. It only just got to her. She wants to see you. I'm not asking you to want to see her. I'm only telling you what I know. Dorsey. Charlotte sat down on the floor, right there, in the doorway. She sat down on the floor with the note in her hand, and Greta said her name, and Raven came over and pushed his head under her arm, and Charlotte stared at the carpet, and the carpet stared back, and she heard somewhere very far away her own voice saying, 8 years. Greta sat down next to her on the floor. It took Greta a long time because Greta was 68, but she did it. 8 years, child. 8 years. 8 years. Charlotte pressed the note against her mouth. She closed her eyes. She thought about a woman on a porch, crying for an hour. For her. She thought about a letter sent 3 years ago, lost in the mail, arriving now. She thought about her grandfather, who had written that letter, knowing he might die before it was answered, knowing he might be wrong to write it, knowing he might be right, writing it anyway. The phone in Greta's kitchen rang. It was a landline. It almost never rang. Greta looked at Charlotte. Charlotte looked at Greta. Greta got up. She walked into the kitchen. She answered. Hello. She listened. Her face changed. She turned and looked at Charlotte through the kitchen doorway, and her eyes filled, and she covered the receiver with her hand, and she whispered, Child, who is it? It's her. Who? Her. Charlotte stood up, slowly. She walked into the kitchen. She took the phone from Greta's hand. She held it to her ear. For a long moment, neither side spoke. She could hear breathing on the other end. She could hear a woman trying very hard not to cry. Finally, the woman said, Charlotte. Charlotte closed her eyes. She said the only thing she could think to say. Why now? Silence. Then, because yesterday I got a letter from your grandfather. The post office sent it to the wrong address for 3 years. It came to me yesterday. What did it say? It said, the woman's voice broke. She put the phone down. She picked it back up. She said it. It said, if you are ready, come. Charlotte did not say anything. The line was quiet. Two women on two ends of a phone, with 16 years and a porch and a 4-year-old between them. Then Charlotte heard herself say in a voice she did not recognize as her own, Where are you? I'm at the motel by the highway, the one with the red sign. Are you alone? Yes. How long are you staying? As long as you want me to, or not at all. Charlotte pressed her forehead against the kitchen wall. She closed her eyes. She thought of Wendell on a porch 16 years ago, telling a woman to come back when she had more than 91 days. She thought of Wendell 3 years ago, writing a letter that said, if you are ready, come. She thought of every Saturday morning, every glass of warm milk, every birdhouse, every chisel, every word. And she said into the phone, into the kitchen, into the dark, into the 16-year silence between a daughter and a mother. Sunday, 10 o'clock, the Methodist Church on Main Street. Sit in the back. The woman on the other end made a sound. It was not a word. It was older than words. Then she said, I'll be there. Charlotte hung up. She stood in Greta's kitchen with her hand on the receiver and her forehead against the wall, and Raven sat at her feet, and Greta stood in the doorway with both hands over her mouth. And outside the window, the sun was going down behind the pines, and somewhere out at the back of an old garage on a separate parcel of land that nobody had ever bothered to untangle, a canvas drop cloth was still covering a shape that Charlotte had not yet uncovered. She did not yet know, that the canvas she had not lifted, the one Greta had told her to wait on, the largest shape in the corner, was the last secret her grandfather had built, and it had been built for her, before she was born. Sunday came slow. Charlotte did not sleep on Saturday night. She lay in Greta's guest bed with Raven on the floor beside her, and she watched the ceiling go from black to gray to pale yellow. She heard the rooster from the property 2 doors down at 4:30. She heard the paper boy at 5:15. She heard Greta start the coffee at 6. At 7 she got up. She put on the same dress she had worn the week before. She braided her hair. Her hands shook the whole time. Greta did not ask her if she was okay. Greta was 68 years old. Greta knew better than to ask a woman who had not slept whether she was okay. Greta only said, I'll drive you, and Charlotte only said, thank you. The Methodist church sat at the corner of Main and Cedar. White steeple, red brick. A sign out front that said, "Welcome home," in the kind of plastic letters that had been put up by somebody's grandson on a stepladder 20 years ago and never taken down. Greta parked 2 blocks away. She turned the engine off. She looked at Charlotte. "Do you want me to come in with you?" "No." "Do you want me to wait out here?" "No." "Do you want me to leave?" "No." Charlotte closed her eyes. She opened them. "I want you to sit in the third pew from the back, on the right, where he used to sit, and I want you to be there when this is over, whatever this is." Greta nodded. She did not say anything. She got out of the truck. Charlotte sat for another minute. Then she got out too. The woman was already inside. Charlotte saw her from the back of the sanctuary. She had picked a pew near the rear. She was sitting alone. Her hands were folded in her lap. She was wearing a navy blue dress that did not quite fit her, the way clothes don't fit a woman who has lost weight she did not mean to lose. Her hair was gray at the temples. She held a Bible. The Bible looked old, the kind of old that comes from being held every day for a long time, not from being left on a shelf. Charlotte's legs almost stopped working. She made them work. She walked down the aisle. She did not sit next to the woman. She sat across the aisle from her, 2 pews up. She did not look over. The woman did not look over either. The organ started. Pastor Calvin walked to the pulpit. He saw Charlotte. He saw the woman. He understood. His face did not change, but his shoulders did. They settled, the way the shoulders of a good shepherd settle when he sees a hard thing happening in his pasture. He opened his Bible. He said, "This morning we are going to talk about the kind of forgiveness that does not happen all at once. We are going to talk about the kind of forgiveness that happens slowly, like a sunrise. We are going to talk about the people who have stood on porches and not been let in. And we are going to talk about the people who have stood on porches and turned others away. And we are going to talk about both of them, because that is most of us. At one time or another, that is most of us." Charlotte put her hand on the pew in front of her. She did not move it for the rest of the service. After the service, the congregation filed out. Charlotte did not move. The woman across the aisle did not move. Pastor Calvin stood at the back of the sanctuary, shaking hands, saying, "Bless you and bless you and bless you." And when the last family had walked out, he did something Charlotte had never seen a pastor do. He locked the front doors. From the inside, he turned the key. He walked back up the aisle. He stopped at the second pew from the front. He sat down. He did not look at either woman. He just opened his Bible. He just stayed there. So they would not be alone. So they would have a witness. So nobody would interrupt. The woman across the aisle stood up first. She walked over to Charlotte's pew. She did not sit down. She stood at the end of the pew. She gripped the wood. Her knuckles went white. "Charlotte." "Yes." "My name is Lorraine." "I know what your name is." Charlotte's voice came out flatter than she meant it. Lorraine flinched. Then she nodded, like she had expected the flatness, like she had been preparing for it. "May I sit down?" Charlotte looked at the empty space beside her. She slid over. Lorraine sat, not close, a full arm's length away, the way a woman sits when she has not earned closer. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then Lorraine reached into her bag. She pulled out an envelope. She pulled out another, and another, and another. There were 16 envelopes. She set them on the pew between them. She did not hand them to Charlotte. She just set them there. She put her hands back in her lap. "He wrote me every month." Charlotte did not pick up the envelopes. "For 16 years. Charlotte did not pick up the envelopes. "He never told me where you were. He never told me anything that I could have used to find you. He only told me how you were. He told me when you lost your first tooth. He told me when you read your first chapter book. He told me when you made the spelling bee in 4th grade. He told me when you broke a coffee cup at 9 and hid it under your bed." Charlotte put her hand on her mouth. "He told me about Saturday mornings. He told me about birdhouses. He told me about the time you sanded the joint on the front of one because he told you that you would always see the gap. He told me that you cried for 10 minutes when the joint came out right. He told me that he had not seen anything that beautiful in a very long time." Lorraine's voice was steady. Lorraine's hands were not. "He told me about your graduation." He went Charlotte. "He went to your graduation. He sat in the back row. He did not come up to you because he was already sick by then, and he did not want you to know. Charlotte made a sound. It was not a word. She did not look at her mother. She picked up the first envelope. The postmark was 2009. She put it back down. He was at my graduation. Yes. He didn't tell me. He didn't want to take the day from you. I would have wanted him to take the day. I know. I would have wanted to know he was there. I know. Charlotte put her face in her hands. She did not cry. She had not learned how to cry in front of a stranger. This woman was a stranger. This woman was also her mother. Both things were true at the same time. She did not know how to hold both things. Lorraine. Yes. Tell me about the porch. Lorraine did not pretend not to know which porch. She took a long breath. I had been sober for 91 days. I had been driving for 2. I had a duffel bag in the back of the car and $12 in my wallet and a photograph of you from your 3rd birthday folded inside a Bible that an old woman at a meeting in Tennessee had given me. I drove to your grandfather's house. I knocked on the door at 11 o'clock at night. He opened it. He did not let me in. What did he say? He said, Lorraine, come back when you have a year. Come back when you have 3 years. Come back when you have something solid to give a 4-year-old child. What did you do? I stayed on the porch for an hour. I cried. I did not yell. I did not push past him. I just stood there and cried, and then I drove away. Where did you go? Back to Tennessee. I had a sponsor. She was waiting up for me. I told her what happened. She held me. We prayed. Did you drink? No. Why not? Because your grandfather told me to come back when I had a year. And I decided right there on his porch that I was going to come back when I had a year. And then a year passed. And then I was scared. So I waited another year, and then another, and then another. I relapsed twice. The second time was bad. I lost almost everything, but I came back 8 years ago, and I have not had a drink since. Why didn't you come back to him? Because by then I was 45 and you were 13 and I was terrified. I thought it was too late. It was too late. It was. It is. Maybe. Charlotte picked up the second envelope. The postmark was 2011. She turned it over. She set it down. He never told me you came. I know. He never told me he wrote you. I know. He told me you left. That's all he said. He said some people don't know how to stay. He said that's not your fault. It wasn't. It was. It was both. Charlotte looked at her mother for the first time. Really looked. The woman across the pew was 47 years old. The woman across the pew was thin in the way of women who had once been thinner. The woman across the pew had gray at her temples and lines at the corners of her eyes, and a small scar on her jaw that Charlotte did not remember from any of the photographs Wendell had kept. The woman across the pew had Charlotte's hands. Charlotte had not noticed her own hands in 20 years. She noticed them now. Lorraine. Yes. I am not going to forgive you today. I know. I might not forgive you ever. I know. I am 20 years old. I have slept under highway overpasses. I have eaten out of garbage cans. I have been ignored by every single adult who walked past me in the last 16 months. And the reason I was on those streets is because my father left, and my mother left, and the one person in my life who stayed died in his garden. I know. You don't get to come back now. I know. You don't get to come back now and ask me for things. I'm not asking for anything. Then what are you doing here? Lorraine looked down at her hands, her own hands, Charlotte's hands. I'm here because your grandfather told me to come. Pause. He said, if you are ready, come. Pause. He didn't say if she is ready. He said, if you are ready. I think he knew that you might never be ready. I think he wanted me to come anyway, so that if you were ever ready, I would be here, not far away, not behind a phone, here, in the same town, so that the choice would be yours. Charlotte closed her eyes. She thought about that for a long time. She opened her eyes. She said, sit there. Don't move. Don't say anything else. Just sit there. Lorraine sat. Lorraine did not move. Lorraine did not say anything else. Charlotte picked up the third envelope. She did not open it. She just held it. Pastor Calvin, 2 pews up, turned a page in his Bible. That was the only sound in the church. She did not let her mother come to the cabin. Not that week. Not that month. She let her come to the church every Sunday. Lorraine sat in the back pew. Charlotte sat in Wendell's pew. They did not speak. After the service, Lorraine left first. Charlotte left second. They did not look at each other when they walked out. They only looked at each other when they walked in. Once. Just a nod, that was all. For 3 months. Charlotte went back to the garage on Monday. She had been avoiding it because she knew what was waiting for her. She knew there was one canvas she had not lifted. She knew Greta had not lifted it for a reason. She knew that whatever was under that canvas had been built by her grandfather and had been waiting in this room and was the last thing he had not yet shown her. She walked across the garage. She stopped at the corner. She put her hand on the canvas. Raven sat behind her. He did not move. He did not bark. He waited. She pulled. Walnut, carved, a crib, a walnut crib. The headboard was hand-carved with vines and small flowers. The slats were thin and perfect, evenly spaced, each one sanded smooth enough to lay a newborn's head against. The base was solid. The joinery was so fine that the seams were invisible. Across the top of the headboard, in her grandfather's hand, carved, not painted, carved, for Charlotte rose from Granddaddy. Charlotte's knees gave. She went down on the concrete. Raven came to her. He did not climb into her lap this time. He just lay down beside her. He pressed his shoulder against her hip. He waited. Charlotte stared at the crib. She did not move for a long time. She thought of her mother, on a porch, in 2009, sober 91 days. She thought of her grandfather, standing in the doorway, saying no. She thought of her grandfather. After Lorraine drove away, walking out to this garage, closing the door behind him, picking up a piece of walnut, beginning. She thought of the years, of the carving, of the headboard, of the slats, of every Saturday morning she had spent in the workshop while her grandfather in a different garage, 20 feet away, had been building furniture for the granddaughter he was already raising. A crib, a rocking horse when she looked, a small wardrobe. She found them all, under the same canvas, a whole nursery, built for a baby who had already been 4 years old by the time it was finished. Built for a baby who would never sleep in it. Built because Wendell could not give it to her mother, so he had given it to the granddaughter he would one day raise. Without a baby, without a mother, without an announcement, just built. She pressed her hand against the carved letters, for Charlotte rose from Granddaddy. She traced them with her fingers. She closed her eyes. She said, "Oh," just that. "Oh. Oh." She did not tell Lorraine about the crib. Not yet. She told Greta. She told Greta on the porch that night with a glass of tea between them and Raven asleep at her feet. She told her about the crib and the rocking horse and the wardrobe and the carved letters and the way she had sat on the concrete floor for an hour and not been able to move. Greta listened. Greta did not say anything until Charlotte was done. Then Greta said, "Child, yes, that man loved you before he knew you. He loved you before you were a person. He loved the idea of you. He loved the idea of you so much that he built a nursery for a baby that hadn't been born. And then he raised you. And then he kept loving you. And then he kept loving you. That is not a normal thing. I know. That is the rarest thing on this earth. I know. You will spend the rest of your life trying to live up to that love. I know. And you won't have to, because that kind of love does not ask you to live up to it. It only asks you to keep it going." Charlotte looked at her. "How?" Greta smiled. "You'll figure it out." Marshall's lawyer dropped the case. He did not have a choice. The trust had been set up in 2012 at a real law firm, by a real attorney, with real witnesses, with a real notarized signature. The cabin and the garage land had been transferred into trust years before Wendell's death. There was no probate claim. There was nothing to challenge. There was nowhere to go. The lawyer told Marshall this in his office on a Thursday afternoon. He told him in plain English. He told him there was no version of this where he won. He told him that pursuing it further would only cost him money he did not have. Marshall did not handle the news well. He came to the cabin one last time, 3 weeks after the porch confrontation. He drove the silver truck up the dirt track. He parked. He did not knock. He walked up to the porch. He stood at the bottom of the steps. Charlotte was inside. She heard the engine. She heard the door slam. She came out. She did not invite him up the steps. He stayed where he was. He looked at her for a long time. He did not look like a man who had come to threaten her. He looked like a man who had come to be defeated. Some men can manage that with dignity. Marshall could not. Charlotte. Marshall. My lawyer told me to come here. He said, go apologize. Maybe she'll be lenient. You're not here to apologize. No? Then why are you here? Because I needed to see it with my own eyes. See what? That my father loved you more than he loved me. Charlotte did not say anything. She watched him. I am his oldest son, Charlotte. I am the firstborn. I was the one who carried his last name through 3 generations. I was the one who tried to make him proud. And you were not even supposed to exist. You were the daughter of his second son, the son who could not stay sober, the son who could not hold a job. And he built you a nursery. He built you a trust. He left you everything. He laughed. It was a bad laugh. I tried for 47 years, Charlotte. I tried for 47 years to be the son he wanted. And you were the granddaughter he wanted without even trying. Charlotte listened. She did not interrupt. She let him finish. When he was done, she walked down the porch steps. She stood 3 feet from him. She looked up at him. He was bigger than her by a foot. It did not matter. Marshall. What? He didn't love me more than you. He did. He loved who stayed. You didn't stay. Dorsey didn't stay. I stayed. Not because I was a better person, because I was 6 years old and he was the only roof I had. I stayed because I had nowhere else to go. And he made the staying worth something. That's the same thing. It's not the same thing. It is. No, you had a choice. You chose to leave. He chose to love who chose to stay. That's not favoritism, Marshall. That's gravity. Marshall stared at her. For a long time. His face did not change. Then it did. Something broke behind his eyes. Just slightly, just for a second. He looked away. He walked back to his truck. He did not get in. He put his hand on the door handle. He stopped. He spoke without turning around. He used to take me to the workshop. When I was 8, before Dorsey was born, he used to put me on a stool and teach me how to plane a board. Charlotte waited. I quit after a year. Why? I don't know. Pause. I didn't know there was anything to quit. Marshall got in the truck. He started the engine. He drove away. He did not come back. He never came back. Dorsey came back 2 weeks later. He came back differently this time. He walked up the dirt track in the late afternoon. The sun was low. He was wearing a clean shirt. His hands were not shaking. He had been sober by then for 6 months. He looked older than Charlotte remembered. He also looked younger. Sober changes the face that way. It puts something back that the drinking takes out. He was carrying a small wooden box. He set it on the porch. He sat down on the bottom step. He did not climb to the porch. He did not ask permission. He just sat there. Like a man waiting at a door he had decided he was not allowed to knock on. Charlotte came out. She sat in the chair on the porch. She did not sit next to him on the steps. That was still too close. She looked at the box. What is it? My first box. Your first what? The first thing I ever built. He taught me to make it when I was 16. Walnut, mitered corners. He told me to put something in it that I didn't want to lose. What did you put in it? Nothing. Nothing. I never put anything in it, because I never had anything I didn't want to lose, until I had you, and by the time I had you, I was already losing you. Charlotte did not say anything. Dorsey slid the box across the porch boards. She did not pick it up. He did not push. He just left it there. He said, I kept it for 30 years. Every time I almost sold it. Every time I needed money. Every time I was drunk and broke and looking around the room for something to pawn. I always picked it up and I always put it back. I could never sell it. I could never figure out why. He looked at his hands. I figured it out this year. He looked up at her. It's yours. It always was. I built it. He helped me. I kept it. And now it's yours. Charlotte looked at the box. She did not move. She did not speak. Dorsey stood up. He brushed off his jeans. He started to walk back down the dirt track. Charlotte heard herself say, Dorsey. He stopped. He turned. Yes. There's a chair. What? There's a chair on the porch, the one next to me. He looked at her. He did not breathe. You can sit in it. Are you sure? For 30 minutes. He walked back. He sat down. He did not try to talk. He just sat. Raven came over and sniffed his shoe. Then Raven lay down at his feet. Charlotte watched that. She had not expected that. The dog had decided. She picked up the box. She opened it. Inside, a single folded piece of paper, yellow with age. She unfolded it. Her grandfather's handwriting, written by the date at the top when Dorsey was 16 years old. This boy has good hands if he ever chooses to use them. Charlotte looked at her father. Her father looked at the paper. He had never seen it. He had been carrying his own father's words inside a box for 30 years, and he had never opened it. He covered his face. He cried. It was not a beautiful cry. It was the cry of a man who had wasted most of his life. Charlotte did not say anything. She did not touch him. She did not need to. She just sat there for the full 30 minutes. When the 30 minutes were up, she said, "Same time next week." He nodded. He stood up. He walked back down the dirt track. Raven watched him go. The cabin took 6 months to finish. Charlotte did most of it herself. She fixed the roof. She replaced the porch boards. She finished the drywall. She painted the inside walls a color that Greta had picked out from a chart at the hardware store, a color called Morning Light, which was a kind of soft yellow that looked like a kitchen at 7 in the morning before anybody else was awake. The plumber came back. He hooked up the rest of the water. He refused payment again. Charlotte did not argue this time. She baked him a pie instead. He ate it standing up in the kitchen and said it was the best peach pie he had eaten since 1987. Teddy Brennan brought her more scrapwood, cherry, walnut, oak. He told her to practice. He told her not to sell anything until she had built 10 pieces of her own that she was proud of. She listened. She built a stool. She built a side table. She built a small bookshelf. She built a jewelry box. She built a coat rack. She built a writing desk for Greta. She built a serving tray for Pastor Calvin. She built a footstool for an old woman in the congregation whose feet did not reach the floor when she sat in her favorite chair. By month 5, she had built 9 pieces. She had one more to build. She knew what it had to be. She built a rocking chair. It took her 3 weeks. She used walnut from the salvaged pews of an old country church that Pastor Calvin had connected her with. The wood was 70 years old, seasoned, past anything you could buy. The grain was tight and dark and full of decades. She shaped the arms the way Wendell had shaped his. But she made the back taller, narrower, her own proportion. A chair that fit her body, not his. The runners she cut from a single board, matching grain. The seat she scooped by hand with a scorp, slow passes, smooth. She sanded everything, 3 grits, then 4. She rubbed it with linseed oil, 2 coats. She set the chair on the porch. She sat in it. It did not wobble. It rocked in a clean arc. She closed her eyes. She heard Wendell say somewhere in her head, "Seat angles about 2 degrees too steep." She laughed. She laughed out loud, for the first time in 3 years. The dog looked up. He thumped his tail. She opened the workshop on a Saturday morning in March. She painted the sign herself, Whitfield and Granddaughter. She hung it from the lean-to. The first customer was Pastor Calvin. He commissioned a small lectern for the church. He paid in advance. He insisted. The second customer was a woman from 2 towns over who had heard about Charlotte from her sister, who had heard about her from Teddy. She wanted a cradle, walnut, for her first grandchild, due in May. Charlotte said yes. She built the cradle. She did not look at her own crib in the corner of the garage while she built it. She did not need to. She had memorized it. The Saturday morning class started in April, 6 children. The oldest was 11. The youngest was 6. 3 girls, 3 boys. They came at 9. They left at noon. Charlotte gave them small pieces of pine and small chisels with the edges dulled so they couldn't cut themselves. She taught them how to sand with the grain. She taught them how to measure twice. She taught them what Wendell had taught her. A girl named Maddie, who was 8, was the first to make a mistake big enough to want to quit. Her box did not close right. The lid was off by a hair. She tried to force it. Charlotte stopped her. Charlotte crouched down next to her. Charlotte put her hand on top of Maddie's hand, on top of the lid. "Wood doesn't lie, sweetheart. If the joint isn't right, don't hit it harder. Plane it down." Maddie looked at her. "What if it never fits?" "It'll fit. We just have to listen to it. Wood will tell you what it wants. You have to be quiet enough to hear it." Maddie thought about that. Maddie nodded. She planed the joint. The lid closed. Maddie smiled. Charlotte smiled back. And somewhere in the back of her chest, in a small, quiet place that she had not been able to reach in a long time, she felt Wendell smile too. Lorraine came to the cabin for the first time in May. It had been 3 months of Sunday pews, 3 months of nods, 3 months of 1 cup of coffee at the diner, then 2, then 4. Charlotte invited her to dinner. She made stew. Lorraine sat in the rocking chair Charlotte had built. She did not know it was Charlotte's first chair. Charlotte did not tell her. Lorraine just rocked in it and ate the stew and looked around the cabin and cried softly twice and did not apologize for crying. At the end of the night, she stood in the doorway. She did not hug Charlotte. She did not try. She just said thank you. Charlotte said, "Come back next week." Lorraine nodded. She drove away. Charlotte watched her taillights disappear down the dirt track. She stood on the porch for a long time after the lights were gone. Raven leaned against her leg. She put her hand on his head. She said to nobody, "I'm not promising anything." But she was already promising something. She just couldn't say it out loud yet. The cardinals came back. Spring went deep. The dogwoods bloomed late that year in Briar Hollow. They always did. They bloomed 2 weeks after the dogwoods in town because the cabin sat in a low spot where the cold air pooled, and Wendell had bought the land partly because of that. He had told the lawyer in 2012 when he signed the trust that the cabin sat where spring took its time. The lawyer had thought it was a strange thing to say. The lawyer had written it down. It was in the trust documents. Charlotte had read it. She had cried then too. She cried at a lot of things now. She had stopped being afraid of crying. Crying was a kind of building. You took the hurt out of yourself and you made something with it. A garden, a chair, a class, a relationship with a mother, a relationship with a father, a morning. The Sunday in May was the warmest one yet. Greta came up to the cabin in the morning. She brought biscuits. Dorsey came in the afternoon. He had been coming every Saturday for 6 months. He had not missed one. He sat on the porch. He did small repairs around the cabin. He did not ask for thanks. He did not ask for forgiveness. He just came. Lorraine came at 5. She brought a coffee cake. Pastor Calvin came at 6. He brought a Bible. He did not preach. He just sat. They all sat on the porch. 5 of them, Charlotte, Greta, Dorsey, Lorraine, Calvin, and Raven. The dogwoods were blooming. The sun was going down. Somebody had started a kettle inside. Charlotte excused herself. She went into the workshop. She came back out with the leather journal. She sat down in the rocking chair she had built. She opened the journal to the last page, the blank one. She picked up the carpenter's pencil. She wrote, "Today I taught a little girl how to plane a joint. She made a mistake the first time. That was the right beginning. I told her what you told me. Wood does not lie. If the joint is not right, do not hit it harder. Plane it down." She got it. She got it the way I got it. Slowly. Then all at once. Thank you, Granddaddy, for waiting for me. I am not going to make it look easy. I am going to make it look like work. Because that is what you taught me. That love is work. That staying is work. That building a thing worth keeping is work. I am keeping it. I am keeping all of it. Charlotte. She closed the journal. She set it on her lap. She looked out at the porch, at Greta, who had become her grandmother, at her father, who had finally come back, at her mother, who had been waiting on a porch for 16 years, at her pastor, who had locked the doors of his church to give 2 women a private place to begin again, at her dog, who had walked up to her behind a sit-go station in August and decided to stay. She closed her eyes. She rocked. The chair did not wobble. The arc was clean. The light went soft. Somebody laughed. She did not see who. It did not matter. It was the porch. It was full. It was hers. Wendell Whitfield did not leave her money. He left her hands. And hands, once they have learned to do the right thing, never stop teaching other hands. He did not say "I love you" often. He did not have to. He poured the milk. He kept the Saturdays. He carved the letters into the headboard of a crib no baby ever slept in. He wrote the letter that took 3 years to arrive. He fixed the fence that leaned. He waited. He waited. He waited. And when the time came, the granddaughter he had been waiting for, Walked through a door he had locked for 30 years, and found him, waiting still, in every chisel, in every joint, in every breath of cedar, in every Saturday morning yet to come. Love is not the loudest thing. Love is the thing that stays, even when nobody is looking, even when it has to wait a long, long time. The sign on the lean-to was weathered now. One winter had done it. Whitfield and granddaughter. The paint had softened, the letters had settled into the wood the way good signs do. Charlotte liked it better that way. New signs were a promise. Old signs were a record. It was Saturday morning, 9 o'clock. The children were already pulling up the dirt track. Maddie came first. She was 9 now. She came alone on her bicycle with a brown lunch bag in the basket and her hair in a braid her mother had stopped doing for her because Maddie had decided to learn to do it herself. She dropped the bike against the porch rail. She did not say hello. She walked straight into the lean-to. She tied on her apron. She said, "Miss Charlotte." "Maddie." "My brother said wood lies." "Did he?" "He said wood does whatever you tell it to do if you press hard enough." "And what did you tell him?" "I told him he doesn't know anything." "Good." "I told him to ask you." "Good." The other children came in twos and threes. A boy named Caleb, who was 7. A girl named June, who was 10 and already taller than her mother. Twins named Riley and Reese, who fought about everything except wood. A small, quiet boy named Sam, who never spoke during the lesson, but who built better dovetails than children twice his age. Charlotte had 11 students now. She had started with 6. She had not advertised. The mothers had told the mothers. The aunts had told the aunts. The grandmothers had told the grandmothers. Within a month, the class had grown. Within 6 months, she had a waiting list. She did not charge. She had never charged. She had told Greta on the porch one evening that the day she charged a child for a Saturday morning was the day she would have stopped being Wendell's granddaughter. Greta had only said, "Then don't ever charge," and Charlotte hadn't. By 10, the lean-to smelled like sawdust. By 11, it sounded like a small workshop in a small town in 1955. Charlotte moved between the children. She crouched. She corrected. She showed Sam how to hold the chisel at a lower angle. She showed June how to read the grain of a board before making a cut. She showed Maddie again that wood does not lie. Maddie did not need to be told this time. Maddie was teaching it to Caleb. Charlotte stood at the door of the lean-to and watched her do it. A 9-year-old girl, in an apron, saying in Wendell's words in Charlotte's voice, "Wood doesn't lie, Caleb. If the joint isn't right, don't hit it harder. Plane it down." Caleb listened. Caleb planed. The joint closed. Charlotte put a hand on the doorframe. She did not cry. But her chest did the thing it always did when this happened. It was happening more often. At noon, the class ended. The children left. The bikes went down the dirt track in a line. Maddie was the last to leave. She always was. She stopped at the porch. She turned around. She said, "Miss Charlotte." "Yes." "My granddaddy died last week." Charlotte went still. "Maddie, honey." "I'm okay." "Are you sure?" "I'm okay. He was old. He was tired. He said it was time." Charlotte sat down on the porch step. She patted the wood next to her. Maddie sat. For a while they did not speak. Raven came up the steps. He was older now. His muzzle had gone gray at the edges. He laid his head across Maddie's lap. Maddie put her hand on his head. She said, "He taught me how to fish." "Did he?" "And how to whistle. Good things to know." "And he said something before he died." "What did he say?" "He said, 'Maddie, the good ones do not leave. They just change rooms.'" Charlotte looked at her. Maddie was looking at the dogwood trees, which were not blooming yet because it was still February, but which would bloom in 3 months because they always did. Charlotte said, "He was right." "I think he was right." "He was right, sweetheart." Maddie nodded. She wiped her face with her sleeve. She stood up. She picked up her lunch bag. She got on her bike. She rode down the dirt track. Charlotte sat on the porch step for a long time after she was gone. Raven did not move. She put her hand on his back. She thought about what Maddie's grandfather had said. The good ones do not leave. They just change rooms. She thought about Wendell. She thought about the garage. She thought about how sometimes in the very early morning, when she walked into the lean-to and turned on the light, she could swear she smelled coffee. Not strong, not obvious. Just there. Dorsey came at 1. He always came at 1 on Saturdays. He had been coming for 14 months without missing one. He had been sober now for 1 year and 8 months. He had gotten a job at the hardware store in town. He worked the parts counter. He was good at it. He remembered the names of bolts the way some men remembered baseball statistics. The owner had told Greta over the summer that Dorsey Whitfield was the best hire he had made in 20 years. Greta had told Charlotte. Charlotte had not told Dorsey. Some compliments are better when they reach you sideways. He climbed the porch. He sat in the chair next to hers. He had earned the chair by then. He had earned it slowly. He set a paper bag on the porch rail. I brought lunch. You did not have to. I know. What is it? BLTs from the diner, pickles, 2 pieces of pecan pie. 2. One for now, one for later. You're getting bold. I'm trying, she laughed. She was laughing easier now. They ate on the porch. They did not talk much. They did not need to. After lunch, he stood up. He took the trash. He did the small repair he had come to do. The front door latch had been sticking, and he fixed it in 12 minutes with a Phillips screwdriver and a small piece of folded cardboard. He did not ask if she had wanted him to fix it. He had noticed. He had brought the screwdriver. He fixed it. He was getting better at this. The being there, the not asking, the fixing. He was learning what his father had known for 40 years. He was learning what he had refused to learn at 16. He was learning it now at 48. Late, yes, but not too late. Lorraine came at 3. She came every Sunday. But sometimes on Saturdays, when she had a long weekend off from the store, she came twice. This was one of those weekends. She brought a casserole. She had gotten good at casseroles. Her grief had taken a shape over the year that was practical. It cooked. It cleaned. It folded laundry. It bought small useful things for the cabin without being asked. A new dish towel. A bag of birdseed. A scented candle for the bathroom. Charlotte had stopped trying to refuse them. She had learned that her mother needed to give, that 16 years of not giving had built up a pressure in the woman that had to come out somewhere. And casseroles were a softer place for it to come out than words. The words were still coming, slowly, but the casseroles came faster. That was okay. That was how it was going to be. The 3 of them sat on the porch that afternoon. Charlotte, Dorsey, Lorraine. It was the first time the 3 of them had sat together since Charlotte was 4 years old. Nobody said that out loud. Nobody needed to. Lorraine sat in the rocking chair, the one Charlotte had built. Dorsey sat in the chair next to it. Charlotte sat on the top step with Raven across her lap. They did not all talk to each other. Lorraine and Dorsey did not really speak. There was too much there. There would always be too much there. They were not pretending, but they sat on the same porch at the same time, without pretending. And that was a lot. Greta drove up at 4. She walked up the porch. She looked at the 3 of them. She raised an eyebrow. She said, "Well, look at that." She sat down. The 4 of them sat. Pastor Calvin came at 5. He did not need an excuse anymore. He came on Saturdays now. He sat. He listened. He sometimes brought his guitar. He sometimes did not. That day he brought it. He sat on the rail. He tuned the guitar. He played soft a hymn that Wendell used to whistle while he sanded. Nobody sang. They just listened. Raven thumped his tail. When the sun went down, Charlotte stood up. She said, "I want to show you something." She went inside. She came back out. She was carrying the journal. She set it on the porch rail. She did not open it. She said, "I have been writing in it for a year." She looked at all of them. "I think one day when I am gone, I want there to be somebody who can read it, the way I read his." She paused. "I don't know who that person is yet." She picked up the journal. She held it against her chest. "But I want there to be one." She did not say it, but she was thinking it. She had been thinking it for weeks. She had not been able to say it out loud yet, but she was thinking about a child. A girl, maybe. A girl who would come somehow in some way in some year. Adopted. Fostered. She did not know yet. She was thinking about a girl who would walk into the lean-to on a Saturday morning at 6 years old. She was thinking about a kitchen with a glass of warm milk. She was thinking about a question. What kind of things, Mama? She was thinking about an answer. Whatever needs building. She was not ready yet. She was 21. She had time. But she was thinking about it. She was thinking that the deal had not ended with Wendell. The deal had only changed hands. After everyone went home, she stayed on the porch. The night was cold. Raven curled against her feet. She opened the journal to the last page she had written. She had written that morning before the children came. Maddie made a mistake on her dovetail this week. She fixed it. She did not need me to tell her how. She fixed it on her own. That is the first time. I sat in the doorway and watched her plane it down. I did not say anything. She looked up at me when she was done. She did not smile. She just nodded. She knew she had crossed something. So did I. Granddaddy, I think this is what you saw. When you watched me sand the birdhouse joint. When I was 11, I think this is what you felt. Thank you for waiting, so that I could feel it too. She closed the journal. She set it on her lap. She looked out at the dark. The dogwoods were not blooming. Not yet. They would. In a few months. They always did. She rocked. The chair did not wobble. The ark was clean. The wind moved through the pines. She thought about her grandfather, about a porch, about a quarter-mile down the road, about a fence that had leaned, about a kitchen with the radio on, about a glass of warm milk, about a 6-digit lock, about a felt lining peeling back to reveal a number, about a key in a hidden compartment, about a crib carved with her name before she was born, about a letter that took 3 years to arrive, about a man who never raised his voice, about a man who built things to last, about a man who loved her before he knew her, about a man who by his own measure had run out of Saturdays, but who had left her somehow all of his. She whispered to the dark, to the dog, to the porch, to the trees, to the man who had once stood quietly in a workshop and taught a 6-year-old girl how to hold a chisel. I'm here, Granddaddy. I'm still here, and I'm building. The wind shifted. A cardinal called somewhere out in the dark. Raven sighed. Charlotte rocked. The cabin glowed behind her, soft and yellow, the color of morning light paint and a kitchen at 7 in the morning. The dogwoods were not blooming yet, but they would. They always did. They always do. The good ones do not leave. They just change rooms.